And welcome back to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be getting into the magic of UVs. Let's jump into it. All right, so welcome back. So today you can see that I have no scene at all. That I've just started to start over. I'm sick of it. This Blade Runner thing. I'm sorry. What have we been doing? I wanted to talk today about UVs. This is a great chance to do it. Okay, so I hope you don't mind. This is kind of more of a lecture style tutorial. The first part of this episode, I'm just going to explain UVs real briefly for those of you who don't understand them well. And then what I'm going to do is second half, we're going to bake out some materials that we can bring over to Unreal. I'm not going to take long to do this, but it's really worthwhile to have on the channel for you to know about it, for those of you who haven't learned. So I thought, hey, let's do it. UVs, what are they? Okay, so the basic long and short of it, you have an editor over here called the UV editor. So if you open that up and you go into edit mode for an object and you select all the faces, you're going to see what the UVs are. Now the primitive types that we've got, so the cube, the sphere, just all the different primitive types, if I was to select those, they already have a pre-decided UV layout. So they've already been done for you. Same with like our little friend, where is she? Suzanne, the monkey. If I bring her over, and you can see she's already been laid out really well. This is a great example of a good UV layout. What makes this good? Well, all of the faces are pretty proportional to their real size in the scene. And it's laid out in a way that's really flat and really even so that we can bring in a two-dimensional texture and we can stick that texture here. And Blender will use this layout, which is a UV layout. Each UV, so each little vertex here in the UV corresponds to a real world vertex. So if I was to select a face, I go to face mode for UVs, and we can select something on our face, and you have to have this little mode turned on, so UV sync selection. You can turn it off if you want, and that's just a different way of viewing the UVs. But is the sync selection on, I can select UVs on, or select polygons on the face, and you see the corresponding UV. So basically a UV is like, it's a polygon, but it's different than a polygon because it's basically saying, okay, how do I map this flat polygon, this three-dimensional polygon onto a flat two-dimensional surface, okay? So it could be any size, like for example, look at the mouth, right? So the mouth, the polygons are, fairly large, and there's two of them side by side. But if we look at the corresponding UV, they're slightly different shape. They're a little squashed down and they're a lot smaller. Okay, so that means that any texture information right here is going to be really tiny. When it comes out, it's going to be a bit blown up. It's going to stretch to fit these. So that's the gist of what's happening. But how do you get a good UV? How do you get something to this point? And this is really tricky. It's basically a puzzle. Every time you have an object, it's a new puzzle that you got to solve when it comes to getting a really good UV. Now, there are degrees of good UVs. You can have kind of an okay UV and get by with it. You can spend hours trying to get a great one and just really struggle. It's just difficult. You have a fair amount of tools that you can use to try and get there. And I'll just show you a few of those real briefly. So let me show you what some bad UVs look like. So I'll just select all in edit mode. And what I'll do is I'll go up to the UV menu, which is right here in the main viewport, not over here. Okay, you've got some UV options here, and you have more UV options over here. So you got to kind of have to use both of these menus, okay? But this is the main list of options for unwrapping. And unwrapping is the process of taking an object and basically turning it into this when you don't have a UV. So I'll just delete the UVs. You can find them under the green tab here, Object Data Properties. And I'll just go right here. This is the UV map. That's what this one is. It's saved right here. You can also see it's listed out right here. So right at the end, you can go to that, select it. But I'm going to delete this. So now we have no UV for this object, okay? So now I couldn't put a texture on this. I could put a material on it that's using just like the texture mapping node, and we're using generated, for example, that bypasses the need for a UV. But if I'm bringing in a material, like a texture from outside, like a photo that I've taken of a monkey, and I'm going to put it on Suzanne's face, well, I need to have a UV map to tell Blender how to map that 2D texture onto this 3D surface. Okay, so I'm going to hit the plus sign to create a new UV map, and automatically it makes one for us. And what it's done is every face is now on this thing. So this is all of the faces, but they're all stacked up on top of each other. So this will never do, right? This will just make a really crazy result. So what we want to do is go up to the UV, and we can just start at the top. So unwrap. If we click unwrap, bam, okay, it unwraps it, and it looks horrible. You can see it's like kind of some kind of horrific Suzanne distorted. Oh, it's just terrible. Like it makes you feel bad, for what we've done to her. Really, that's pretty. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So this is a bad UV, right? Why? Well, you have tons of polygons that are super tiny, tons of UVs that are tiny, 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 and they're all bunched up together. Like, look how small these are getting. So any texture information is just going to be completely lost. Like, you'd have to have like a 12K texture to even be able to make out any detail, right? So, and these are fairly decently sized planes on her face. Like that's pretty big place, but this is so small. So this isn't going to work. We need to unwrap it a bit smoother. So we go all Smart UV project. Let's do that one. So click OK, just keep whatever settings. And all right, we're getting somewhere. We can kind of see her face. Smart UV project has some options. You can open these up. We've got an angle limit, island margin, and area weight. You can change the angle limit. And basically what you're saying is, okay, if the polygons are, a certain angle to each other, then you can break it and make a new UV, basically. So you can see if I bring it all the way down here to like 7, my computer starts to go very slowly because it's trying to calculate for everything. And it lays out almost every polygon in its own place. And you can change your island margin here, dragging that out. And basically that's just changing the amount of space in between each one. So if we take this back up to like, let's say 50, or go all the way up, I think 89 is the highest it goes. Yeah, there we go. You can see island margin just changes the margin size, and area weight changes something else. Anyways, so again, this isn't going to work, right? So she's all broken up. This is going to create a seam right here, like on her face. If I've got a material or texture, it's just going to, kind of break here because this isn't continuous, and yeah, it's just going to be gross. So, you can keep going down the list. We've got the follow active quads. We've got a light map. This is something different. So this is light maps. Light maps are that special kind of UV layout that Unreal can generate. These actually aren't very good light maps for using in Unreal. And there's some specific reasons to that. But one of them is that they're not very proportional to the actual size of the faces. It's actually better to have just a really clean UV layout for texturing and then allow Unreal to make its own. And once you kind of see what they look like after a while, you can get more advanced and start making your own UV maps. But I wouldn't use Lightmap Unpack to do that. Next one, going down the list, follow active quads. Again, this one's going to give us a weird result. We're not going to see really good results with any of these for Suzanne. They're just all going to be a bit strange. With the cube, however, we will see some good options. So let's select the cube. Let's go cube projection. Okay, there we go. So now every face of this cube is just fills the entire texture, which you might want, depending on what you want. If you want to have the same image on every side, this would work. But if I go to Smart UV Project, right, it's going to divide my faces up like that, which, again, is another way of doing it. You could do it this way. If you had a special texture where like one of these sides, you had something painted here you wanted, you could grab this one. Now you're just using the G key and like pop it there. And so now suddenly you're going to get that little bit of texture on it. So it's pretty versatile. You can scale these and rotate them. But if I wanted to get this one to work like it was before, I would want to use the follow active quads. And this one's going to follow the active quads. It's a bit hard to understand, but basically it's trying to like follow the flow of the UVs, or flow of the polygons. And that's how you get this really nice result with this. So you kind of have to experiment between all of them until you hit one that actually really works well. So again, back to Suzanne, how do we solve this problem? Well, we need to make some seams. Seams are basically cuts. So it's you're selecting a vertex or selecting an edge, and you're saying, all right, this is an edge that you can cut. You can cut this edge. We don't have to have this be continuous. And that gives Blender the option to then figure out, oh, okay, well, if I cut it here, then I can fold this bit out and lay it out. And think of it like a piece of clothing. Like if this was an actual piece of cloth that we've sewn and sewn together into this shape and stuffed it with cotton, right? What would we start with? Like, what would be the flat piece of cloth? What pattern would we have to cut first before we could then sew it all back up together? So you can just experiment with this to try and find something that works well. So the general rule of thumb is you want to hide your seams, find places where they're not going to be as noticeable. And that's just so that just in case, sometimes with a texture, you can see where the seams are. But just for now, I'll just hit Alt click to go a loop selection right down the middle. And right up under UVs, you can click Mark Seam, and it's going to turn pink. And then if you select Alt and Unwrap, we're going to get a much better result. Unwrap is basically, it's always the first one to kind of go to. This is the basic, just unwrap it clean, don't do anything special. So this is how you can get like the cleanest look. You can start with that. All these other ones are trying to do other things to get you to where you need to go. You can even, I didn't show you this one, but you can project from the view as well, which can be really useful for some objects or some textures. Like if you're only wanting to texture right on the front of something and you're never going to see the back or the side, you can just do this and then throw a texture on it. makes it a whole lot better. But anyways, so back to this. So that looks a lot better. We still have some problems, like, if we do have a seam right down the face, that's going to cause some problems. So let's deselect. We'll just select these edges, and we'll go up to UV clear seam, and that'll clear that seam. So now the seam just starts under the chin. Okay, and we can see what result that gave us. We go unwrap, and okay, it's gotten something different. But now actually, it's a little bit better. Our mouth kind of looks pretty good. The face is pretty flat. The nose is maybe a little too small. What you could do is you could select some of these faces and put on like proportional editing, for example, and shrink down your editing thing and just scale up maybe the nose a touch so that now those UVs are a little bit bigger. You can also then move these guys around. Use like the L key. That will work if you've got UV sync selection turned on. So anyways, you can hit L now to select everything that's continuous and like maybe move it up like this. But still had proportional editing turned on. And yeah, then maybe like move the eyes. And these are coming out separate because they are their own separate mesh object. So like you can hit L and you'll see this is just a separate mesh object. So anyway, so you kind of just play around. So you can find some seams, and you don't want to cut too many. If you start cutting too many, you're going to get weird stuff. Again, it's sort of trying to find a happy medium. And this is powerful because if you've got this laid out now, we've got our new UV map. We can name it, monkey UV1. You could have multiple UVs on an object so that you had maybe different materials and different parts. You want to use different UVs. If you're making your own light maps, if you're a bit more advanced, you can make another UV on this and call it, this will be like your light map UV that you might save for your object. So this is how you get some good UVs. And this is really useful for getting that kind of clean stuff. If you're going to be trying to do baked lighting in Unreal and use static objects and static lights, that's really the first step, getting some good UVs on all of your objects. All right, let's jump into our scene. Okay, so here we are in our scene. Now, we want to think about what are the materials we want to bake to bring over into Unreal. And what do I mean by bake? What I mean is we need to turn the material into a texture file, something that Unreal can read. So for example, our building walls right now, we're using a bump map, right? And that bump map is being generated using a noise texture. We've got our texture coordinate node we're using generated. So we're not using UVs for this. We haven't actually unwrapped this thing, so we don't have good UVs on it. We're just generating it based on the world space, which is a way of affecting material nodes that you can use where the computer is generating it all within itself. If we were bringing in a texture image, we could still use generated to lay that texture image. It wouldn't have as much control, and it probably wouldn't have a good result. So that's where you really need to start using UVs. But to bake something out, this is sort of infinite, right? We can create a really small noise texture and it's going to play out across this, and it's going to be different like over here from over here because noise is just random and it's constantly generating. And by doing this and not using a UV or using a texture, you can get detail that's really nice because it just continues on forever. But if we're using a texture and we're going to bake this out, we're basically going to be reusing the UVs. We're actually going to be using that texture information over the entire thing. So a good example is the floor, right? So the floor, we've got a noise kind of going across it to create some different roughness. And that noise works really well because it's different across the whole object. And that could be infinite. We could make this huge and it would be different across the whole object. But if we bake this out, basically we need to be baking it corresponding to some UVs. And so we can either have a UV layout that's the same size as the floor, in which case we need like a 4, maybe even an 8K texture to have enough resolution that this just doesn't fall apart and look all just pixely and noisy. But that's going to be really tough on memory and Unreal, right? So then we might want to go, well, okay, what if we just use our little bit over here, before we've got our arrays turned on, for example, so just this guy. Now, if you did that, you could make the UVs just be this, and now you could, bake out your noise pattern on this. But then the noise pattern is going to repeat over and over again for each of the same squares because they all have the same UV layout and they're all using the same single texture material. So that can result in repetitive patterns that you can really see and notice, and so it can really kill the effect. So it's a tricky thing thinking about how to bring noise over into something like Unreal. Now, the best option would be to recreate your noise in Unreal, which you can do. So Unreal has noise nodes as well, and it can generate stuff. But the problem is it's such a different way of doing it. Well, not too different, but it is different enough that it takes a while to learn. You just have to, it's just not straightforward. It's not the same as Blender. So you can't just take your Blender knowledge into Unreal and make the same thing happen. You kind of have to work out how Unreal thinks about these things and what it needs to make it work. And that can take some time and be confusing if you just want to kind of jump over and do something. So, if you've got a lot of knowledge about Blender and its node system, then sometimes it's better just to make your stuff here and then bring them out as textures where it's appropriate, okay? Now, one of the examples of something that could be appropriate would be this hologram object, and this is what we'll look at first. How would we bring this material over? Now, as a caveat, there is also a wireframe shader node or there's a way to get a wireframe shader in Unreal, okay? And that is actually going to give you a better result than doing this, what we're about to do. But this really teaches it well and gives a great example. And there's going to be a lot of scenarios where you won't have a node in Unreal that's just like what you have here, or you won't have the effect that you've got here in Unreal. I mean, in general cases, you can make most everything you could make in Blender, you could make it in Unreal. But it sort of defeats the purpose if you're good at Blender and you really can make stuff that works, and you can make materials that you don't really need to worry about the fact that you're baking it to a single UV size. Then it's worth it just to go with wherever you're fast at, go with what you're good at, and make that work. So I'll just show you how this process works. First step for us is to take this object and to turn it into some good UVs, okay? So I'll just switch back to solid mode and we'll have a look at what our UV layout looks like. I'll hit all to select. You can see it's an absolute mess. It looks really gross. I'll bring up my UVs here as well, my UV maps, just so we can see. We only have one, so that's good. So we need to start off and try and find something that's going to work for this. Okay, so let's just select everything and we go up UV and we just click Unwrap just to see what happens first. So, okay, we get a pretty good result actually, just straight off the bat. But there's a couple of deceptive things about this. It looks really good, but when you think about it, there's a couple of things about this that aren't very good. Namely, if you go inside the object here, remember we've got these pillars, right? So let's have a look at where those pillars are. So I'll just switch to the sync mode so we can see. And oh wow, hey, these pillars are tiny. So any kind of this wireframe material that we've got is just going to disappear on these guys, and that's not going to look good at all. So we need to do something a little bit better. So we're going to have to mark some seams, okay? So let's go back to edge mode, and let's think about where we might find some good seams. Well, one I can think of would probably be the door. That's probably a good place to start. That'll help Blender separate the inside from the outside of our objects. So let's click those, and maybe even, I don't know, maybe even one down the side. Why not? And let's go UV mark seam and hit all and unwrap. And what does that do for us? Okay, cool. Instantly we get a better result. Now we've got this sort of outer section and then we've got this inner section. You can see the shape of our pillars right there, really working out well. And then it's got our doors over here. So that's pretty great. I might increase my margin just a little bit, just so they're spread out a little bit. And now I can think about, all right, well, maybe is there a better way that I could position these objects? So let me, I'll select this one and I'll get out of that mode. And when it all disappears, just hover back over here with your mouse and hit A to select all. And let's hit L to select everything that's continuous there about those guys, and go over here, grab this, select L, I'll stick them in this corner. Actually, I'll just grab them over here so they're side by side. And then let's see if we can find a better layout for this. So I'm going to grab this up and I'm going to scale it up and rotate it. And I'm just trying to fill the space because you don't want to waste any space with a texture. You got to keep it within these bounds. All right. And these are sort of arbitrary bounds. This isn't like a certain size of pixel because you can have any size texture, but it's always going to correspond to this sort of shape. And you just want to be able to fill that space really well. All right, that's pretty good. I don't think we can get that any better. I don't think we can get that one any better either. So we might just run with this. I'll make these guys just a touch bigger since we've got the space. Now we could think about, all right, well, maybe what we could do is we could cut the pillars out or cut the roof out. And that might fill this a bit more, but it's going to be tricky with an object like this because we got these large circular spaces that take up a lot of room. So I don't really think I'm going to get anything much better than this. So I'm going to leave it there. That's pretty good. So yeah, just cutting those simple seams in the door was enough to make the magic happen. The magic of UVs. Again, I hope you've really enjoyed this episode. I hope you've learned a lot about how to do UVs, how they work. Once again, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody checking these videos out and putting their comments in the comment section. And it's just awesome. All the feedback's been really great. So please hit that like button if you like this video. I want to see more like it. I'm going to keep making them. And please subscribe. Please subscribe so that you can get notifications. Ring that little bell. The notification window will pop up when a new one launches. I'm trying to premiere these every Wednesday and be there. So when I can, things are a little busy for us right now, but We're getting through it, and I'm going to keep showing up as much as I can. So I'll see you when the next video launches. Have a great week, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.